The Galactic Peace Summit was supposed to be the safest place in the galaxy. It was held inside the Sky Spire, a massive station floating between two suns, guarded by fleets from 10 different species. Every leader, every delegate, every soldier believed that nothing could go wrong here. Among the guests was Elena Vostrikov, the human representative, wearing a plain dark suit and a soft smile. She spoke politely, listened more than she talked, and seemed like the most harmless person in the room. The alien commander Tren, tall and scaled like black stone, noticed her during the opening ceremony. She did not walk like a warrior, or speak like a politician hungry for power. She simply stood there with calm eyes and a small smile, as if the chaos of the galaxy did not concern her. When he heard someone whisper her human nickname, Baba Yaga, he almost laughed. His language, the name, meant nothing, but the tone made it sound like a ghost story. A deadly witch from human folklore, they told him. He looked at her small frame and slow steps and dismissed it as human exaggeration. No one that gentle could be dangerous. The first sign that something was wrong came without warning. A ripple. In the atmosphere, a sudden silence over the com channels, and then the Sky Spire sensors screamed. A warship appeared in high orbit, its markings unknown to any database. Shields flared, defense turrets turned, and the air inside the summit grew tense. Delegates whispered in panic, some already moving toward the exits. Stations. Yet in the middle of all that noise, Alina stood by the viewing platform, hands resting lightly on the railing, watching the ship with the same calm she had shown when the meeting began. Tren watched her from across the chamber. Even the most battle-hardened guards were shifting in their armor, but she didn't move. The unknown warship rotated slowly, as if scanning the station. Tren expected her to ask for protection, to call for her own security team. Instead, she turned her head slightly toward him and asked in a quiet voice, how many shots would it take to bring the station down? He hesitated, unsure if she was joking. Her tone was not playful. Was calculating something, and it was not fear he saw in her eyes. That night, the Sky Spire's balconies were empty. Everyone was inside, either planning defenses or pretending to sleep through the tension. Tren could not rest, so he walked the long glass corridors overlooking the endless stars. That was when he saw her again, alone on the highest balcony, her hands in her coat pockets, looking up at the black sky between the twin suns. She didn't hear him approach, or maybe she didn't care. Her gaze was fixed on the darkness, not on the shining stars, but the spaces between them. There was no nervous shifting, no quick glances over her shoulder. When the wind shifted through the station's artificial atmosphere, her hair moved slightly, but her eyes stayed locked on something invisible to him. He felt an odd weight in his chest, like the moment before a predator strikes. He stepped closer and asked why she was not with the other diplomats. Her answer was slow, each word deliberate. Because I don't hide when something dangerous is watching. The way she said it made the skin under his armor tighten. He had fought in 4 wars and never felt such a strange unease. She finally looked at him, and in that moment he understood why her people called her by the name of a ghost. Her eyes did not reflect the warm light of the station, but the cold shine of faraway stars. Like she belonged somewhere much darker than here. Tren found himself breaking eye contact first, something he had never done with anyone. Faintly, but it was not the smile of someone amused or friendly. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what was coming and was already prepared to meet it head-on. When he left the balcony, he noticed his claws had been flexing as if ready for a fight. It made no sense. She was just a human diplomat. Yet she carried herself like someone who had walked through hell and found it too small to be frightening. He told himself it was just the tension of the unknown ship in orbit, the pressure of the summit, the fear of an attack. But when he glanced back one last time, Alina was still there, staring at the black sky, as still as a statue. And even from that distance, he felt the same thing again. Not fear for her safety, fear of her. The second day of the summit began. Under heavy guard, armed soldiers stood at every corridor, scanning each face that passed. The unknown warship still floated in orbit, silent and unmoving, but its presence was like a blade hanging above them all. Inside the grand chamber, voices clashed over what to do. Some wanted to send more ships to intercept. Others argued it could be a diplomatic misunderstanding. Alina sat at the long conference table, quiet as always, her hands folded in front. Of her, to most, she looked bored. To Tren, she looked like someone listening to a sound only she could hear. The air in the chamber was tense, yet she kept tracing slow circles with her fingertip on the polished surface of the table, her gaze distant. Then the first scream came. It cut through the noise like a blade, high and sharp, from one of the private dining halls. Guards rushed in that direction, the delegates rising in confusion. Within minutes, the news spread. One of the Raw collective representatives had collapsed during the meal. His skin had turned a strange shade of gray, his eyes clouded. The medical team confirmed it. Poison, one they had never seen before. Security locked down the hallways and activated barrier fields around the summit chamber. No one was allowed to leave. Whoever had done this was still inside. Tren stood near the entrance, scanning for suspicious movement. Some delegates shouted in fear. Others whispered among themselves. Lena didn't move. When he stepped toward her, she looked up as if she had been expecting him. "They're testing the defenses," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the noise. "They won't get another chance." Tren frowned, asking how she could know that. She simply looked back at him and smiled faintly, as if she knew more than she was saying. Later that night, long after the lockdown was lifted, Tren found himself unable to rest. The incident kept replaying in his mind, the speed, the precision, the way the assassin had struck and vanished without leaving any trace. He left his quarters and began walking the dim corridors of the residential wing. Most of the lights were on low power for night cycle, casting long shadows on the walls. That was when he heard a voice speaking in a language he didn't recognize. It came from an open balcony door ahead. He moved closer, silent on his heavy feet. Lena was there, standing by the railing, speaking into the empty air. Her tone was calm, but the words had a sharp edge, quick and clipped, like coded instructions. The translator in his ear clicked and hissed, unable to process even a single phrase. It was not any known galactic tongue. She paused, tilting her head as if listening to someone answer her. There was no cum device in her hand, no earpiece visible. After a few moments, she spoke again in that same strange language, and the air around her seemed colder, heavy in a way Tren couldn't explain. She finally stopped and looked out into the stars again, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Without turning, she said, "You shouldn't be standing behind me like that, Commander." Her voice was casual, but he felt his stomach tighten. He stepped forward, asking who she was speaking to. She turned her head just enough for him to see her smile. Not warm, not friendly, but knowing. "Just an old friend," she said. "Yeah. One who's very interested in what happens next." Tren didn't ask more. He wasn't sure he wanted the answer. But as he walked away, the words she had spoken earlier echoed in his mind. "Won't get another chance." He wondered if she was making a promise or a threat. The third day began with even heavier tension. The warship in orbit had not moved, but its shadow lingered over every conversation. Guards doubled their patrols, scanners checked every meal and drink, and yet the unease was worse than before. Delegates whispered in corners, some speaking of leaving the summit altogether, and kept his eyes on the entrances, determined to spot trouble before it struck again. But trouble did not come in the open this time, and came quietly, like a breath in the dark. By mid-afternoon, 2 delegates from different species had gone missing. Their guards swore they had been standing nearby only minutes before. Search teams combed the station, but there were no alarms, no security alerts, no signs of a struggle. The surveillance feeds showed them walking down empty corridors. Then nothing, as if they had simply stepped into the air and vanished. Panic began to spread. The once orderly summit turned into a place of muttered suspicions and shifty glances. Tren led one of the search groups himself, his claws ready, every sense alert. He followed a faint heat trail through the lower decks, far from the guest areas. The corridors here were narrow, lined with humming pipes and flickering lights. His team moved in formation, but even the soldiers looked uneasy. The air smelled faintly metallic, and somewhere ahead a slow dripping echoed like a heartbeat. It was there, deep in the maintenance passageways, that he found her. Alina was standing over the body of an unconscious alien, a tall insectoid trader, who had been seen at the summit earlier. She was holding a blade unlike any Tren had seen before. Its surface shimmered in strange colors, almost alive. She crouched, wiped the blade clean on the alien's clothing, and slid it back into a hidden sheath beneath her coat. When she saw Tren, she straightened slowly, her expression unreadable. "He wasn't the real threat," she said calmly, as if explaining why she had just taken a glass of water instead of ending a life. "The real one is still coming." Tren's soldiers shifted uneasily, their weapons half-raised. He told them to lower them, though he wasn't sure why. Something in her voice made him believe her. He asked her how she had found the missing delegates, but she only looked at him for a moment, then glanced toward a dark side passage where the lights were dead. "Because I know how hunters move," she said. Her tone was quiet but cold, and it struck him that she had not said killers. She had said hunters. Like she understood their thinking in a way normal people could not. As they moved back toward the safer parts of the station, Tren couldn't shake the feeling that she was not just a diplomat caught in danger. She walked with measured steps, her eyes scanning corners as if she expected an ambush at any moment. She didn't. Just noticed danger. She was looking for it. And when she passed through the pools of shadow along the walls, it almost seemed as though the shadows leaned toward her. It's like they knew her name. By the time they returned to the summit chambers, word of another disappearance had already spread. The delegates were demanding answers, the air thick with fear. But Alina didn't seem surprised at all. She stood at the edge of the room, eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if listening again to something only she could hear. When she finally looked back at Tren, there was no comfort in her gaze, only certainty. "They'll make their move soon," she said softly.
Ow.
"When they do, you'll see why they call me Baba Yaga." The station felt different on the fourth day. The lights were the same. The voices of the delegates still filled the chamber, but beneath it all was a low, constant fear. The disappearances had shaken everyone.
Ow.
No one walked alone anymore, and yet more than one guard was caught glancing over their shoulder, as if something unseen followed them. The unknown warship still lingered above, silent, unmoving, but its presence was no longer the most frightening thing. Whatever was inside the station had everyone on edge. Tren had stopped thinking of Alina as just a diplomat he had seen. The way she moved through the corridors, the way her eyes studied every shadow. She never carried visible weapons, yet he knew she was armed. That shimmering blade she had used the night before was unlike any tool of war he had seen in his long career. And the way she had spoken of hunters, that had stayed with him. They met in one of the observation halls, away from the noise. She stood with her back to the glass, the twin suns blazing far behind her. "It's not here for the summit," she said without preamble. "It's here for me." Tren's spine stiffened. She explained slowly that she was not sent to negotiate peace at all. Her mission was to track and eliminate something that had been moving through the galaxy for centuries. Something older than most civilizations, something that could hide inside any species. "It wears a face like a mask," she said. "Learns your voice, your habits, and then it takes you apart from the inside." Her tone was flat, but her eyes were hard. "It's done this before. Entire colonies gone, whole fleets lost without a battle. No one has ever caught it." When he asked why it would come to the most heavily guarded event in the galaxy, she didn't answer right away. She only stared at him until he felt a faint chill run down his spine. "Because it knows I'm here," she said finally. "And it knows I'm hunting it." Word spread quickly among the delegates that the human was not who they thought she was. Some called her dangerous. Others demanded she be removed from the summit altogether. To them, she was a threat to their fragile safety. But that night, when the lights across the station went out for exactly 6 minutes, no one spoke of removing her again. The emergency lights flickered on, revealing chaos. One guard was lying in the middle of the corridor, his helmet shattered. His body was intact, but his face was gone. Not cut or burned, simply missing, as if it had never been there. The medics covered him quickly, but the whispers began at once. No one wanted to admit it, but fear made the truth clear. Something was inside the station with them, and it could move even when the entire security grid was active. Tren found Alina in the aftermath, standing in the dim red glow of the backup lights. She didn't ask what had happened. She already knew. When he met her gaze, it was like staring into the depth of space. Silent, cold, endless. For the first time, he felt not just fear for the safety of the summit, but fear of what Alina herself might be capable of doing before this was over. She broke the silence with only 4 words, spoken as if they were inevitable. "We hunt it now." The hunt began before the station's systems had fully recovered from the blackout. Guards moved in tight groups, weapons ready, scanning every corner and shadow. Delegates were confined to their quarters under heavy watch, though some refused to sleep, afraid of what might come through the door. The corridors were quiet, too quiet, as if the sky spire itself was holding its breath. Tren stayed close to Alina, not because she needed protection, but because he suspected she was the only one who could find the thing before it struck again. Hours passed without a sign, until a warning came from the central security hub. A delegate had been spotted moving toward the restricted maintenance levels, someone who should have been under guard. Tren's team raced there, boots slamming against the metal floor. But by the time they reached the lower decks, the figure was gone. What they found instead was Alina, standing in the middle of a narrow passage, facing a tall, broad-shouldered alien whose eyes burned with something not natural. The air around them felt wrong, heavy, as if gravity had thickened. The alien's lips curled into a strange, two-eyed smile. When it spoke, the voice was low and echoing, almost to voices. "At once, the wolf without a pack," it said, mocking. Tren saw Alina's shoulders straighten, her expression unreadable. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. She just stared at it, and the air between them seemed to tighten. For the first time, the creature hesitated. It was only for a second, but Tren saw a flicker of something that looked like fear. Then Alina moved. Her hand blurred as the shimmering blade appeared from under her coat. In a single motion, she stepped forward, locking the creature between 2 closing bulkheads, with a command only she seemed to know. Metal walls slammed into place, trapping them in the narrow space. The alien twisted, its face shifting strangely as if trying to melt into another form. Alina leaned close enough to whisper something in a language Tren had never heard. The creature's grin faltered just before she drove the blade into its neck. Instead of blood, thick black smoke poured out, swirling violently before vanishing. Into the vents above, the alien's body collapsed, empty, like a puppet with its strings cut. Tren moved forward, but Alina held up her hand. "It's not dead yet," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge in it that made even the soldiers freeze. The lights above flickered once, twice, as if the station itself shivered. Alina stepped over the body and started walking toward the next corridor without looking back. "It knows we can hurt it now," she added, almost to herself. "That means it will be desperate. And desperate things make mistakes." Tren followed, his claws flexing involuntarily. He didn't know what was more unsettling, the idea of the creature still moving somewhere in the shadows, or the way Alina seemed almost eager for the final confrontation. The final hunt began in silence. No alarms, no orders over the comms. No sound but the quiet thud of boots on metal. Alina led the way through the maintenance tunnels, moving with the precision of someone who had walked these corridors in her mind 100 times before. Tren and his soldiers followed close behind, their weapons ready, though each step felt heavier than the last. The air was cold here, colder than anywhere else on the station. It carried a faint, sharp smell like burned metal mixed with rot. The creature was close. The tunnels twisted deeper into the station's skeleton, where the lights were dim and the air recyclers groaned like old doors. Every shadow seemed thicker than it should be, and more than once, Tren thought, he saw shapes shift just at the edge of his vision. The creature's voice came from everywhere at once, soft, mocking, impossible to pinpoint. It spoke in the languages of the delegates it had taken, switching mid-sentence, weaving threats with quiet laughter. "You can't kill a shadow," it said at one point, Alina didn't answer. She didn't even look around. She just kept walking, her pace steady, her hand never far from the blade. Finally, they reached a sealed bulkhead deep in the lowest level. The door was old, scarred, and thick enough to stop a starship rifle blast. Lena stopped in front of it, eyes fixed on the steel. "It's behind this," she said. Tren's soldiers moved to stand beside her, but she shook her head. "No, this part is mine." Her voice left no room for argument. She keyed the door open and stepped inside. Alone. The bulkhead shut behind her with a deep, echoing clang, leaving Tren and the others outside. The next hour was the longest of Tren's life. At first, there was nothing, just silence. Then came a sound like metal tearing, followed by a deep, inhuman scream that made the walls tremble. More screams followed, some too high, some too low, each cut short as if swallowed. The lights flickered, and the floor shuddered beneath their feet. Through it all, no one dared move. When the door finally opened, the light inside was dim and filled with drifting steam. Lena walked out slowly, her coat torn in places, her hands steady. The blade in her right hand dripped with a dark, steaming liquid that hissed when it hit the floor. Eyes were cold, her face unreadable. She looked at Tren, then at the soldiers, and said only, "It's done." No one asked what had happened inside. They didn't need to. Whatever that thing had been, it would not be wearing anyone's face again. Lena wiped the blade clean and slid it back under her coat as if it had all been routine. Then she looked toward the summit chamber and spoke in a voice that carried through the tunnel. "Now," she said, "we can talk peace." Tren realized then that the galaxy's most feared human was not feared because of her strength or her skill, but because she had the patience to wait, the will to hunt, and the resolve to walk alone into the dark and return. The summit resumed the next day, but the air inside the Sky Spire was different. The fear that had clung to every corridor was gone, replaced by a heavy, uneasy silence. Delegates spoke in measured tones, their voices lower, their eyes often sliding. Toward the human diplomat at the far end of the table, Alina Vostrikov sat as she always had, hands folded. Expression come, but now every movement she made drew attention. Even the guards, hardened soldiers from a dozen worlds, kept a careful distance, as if proximity alone might draw danger back. The unknown warship that had hovered above the station for days was gone. No one saw it leave, and none of the sensor logs recorded its departure. Some whispered that it had fled after realizing what had happened in the lower decks. Others suspected it had never truly been a ship at all, only part of the Predator's plan. No one dared ask Alina which was true. Tren, however, could not stop thinking about it. He had seen creatures that could tear through armor, assassins who could vanish in plain sight, but nothing like what he had faced with her. In the quiet moments between speeches and agreements, he studied her. She never fidgeted, never glanced around the room. Her eyes moved only when there was something worth looking at, as if her mind was always calculating possibilities no one else could see. Midway through the final negotiation session, one of the younger delegates made the mistake of speaking lightly about the recent incident, as if it had been no more than an unfortunate misunderstanding. He smiled as he said it, glancing in Elena's direction as if testing her reaction. The room seemed to grow still. Elena turned her head slowly toward him, her gaze locking on his. There was no change in her expression, no sudden move, but the young delegate's smile faltered almost instantly. He looked away, swallowing hard, his hands curling under the table. The other delegates avoided eye contact, as if the exchange had been something private and dangerous that they wanted no part of. When the final agreement was signed, the summit's host thanked every representative for their courage and cooperation. But when he reached Alina, his words stumbled slightly, as though he had forgotten his speech. She nodded politely, offered a brief handshake, and left without a single backward glance. In the docking bay, as she prepared to board her ship, Tren approached her. "It's over then?" she asked. She looked at him for a long moment, the faintest trace of a smile touching her lips. "For now," she said. Her tone carried no comfort, but shadows don't die. They just wait. As her ship departed, Tren realized something that made his scales tighten. The galaxy would speak of the Baba Yaga with fear and awe, but not because she hunted monsters. It would be because somewhere, out there in the dark, something still feared her, and whatever feared her was worth fearing.